Robert Kane stood at the edge of the crystal room, surveying his kingdom of influence. The chandeliers cast diamond patterns across Italian marble floors as Manhattan's elite clinked champagne flutes, worth more than most people's monthly rent. At 55, Robert had the confident posture of a man who had bent the world to his will. His custom Tom Ford suit draped perfectly over his still athletic frame, salt and pepper hair expertly styled to project authority without vanity. His Patek Philippe watch, worth more than a suburban house, peeked from beneath his French cuff as he raised a glass of Krug Brut 1988. To 3 billion reasons to celebrate, he announced to appreciative chuckles from the circle of power players around him. Senator Williams smiled tightly, already mentally spending the campaign contributions this deal would generate. Two competing CEOs nodded with grudging respect. The acquisition of North Star Technologies represented another victory in Robert's unbroken winning streak. "Mr. Kane, your usual table is ready," the maitre d' said with practiced deference. As Robert moved through the restaurant, conversations paused, heads turned. Not from celebrity recognition, but something more valuable, the instinctive human awareness of apex power. The corner booth afforded him privacy while maintaining his view of the entire establishment. Old habits from decades of business negotiations. Never sit with your back to the door. "We'll need another bottle," Robert instructed without looking up from his phone, where stock prices and congratulatory messages competed for his attention. "Right away, sir." The voice was different, younger, less polished than his regular server. Robert glanced up briefly, registering a new waitress. Mid-20s auburn hair, pulled back in a professional bun, green eyes focused on maintaining composure in the presence of wealth that would take her decades to accumulate. Her name tag read Kate Taylor. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though Robert couldn't place it. Probably just another struggling actress paying bills through service work. New York was full of them. "And water," he added, already dismissing her from his consciousness as he returned to his messages. Kate nodded professionally and turned to leave when her eyes caught something that made her freeze. Robert had pushed up his sleeve slightly to check his watch, revealing an intricate tattoo on his inner wrist. A compass rose with a date beneath it, June 14, 2000. Her heart began racing, the serving tray suddenly heavy in her trembling hands. The room seemed to narrow to that small, inked patch of skin. She had seen its twin every day of her life. "Excuse me, sir," Kate had said, her voice barely audible over the ambient restaurant noise. "My mother has a tattoo exactly like yours." The crystal champagne flute slipped from Robert's hand, shattering against the floor. The explosion of glass silenced nearby conversations as every head turned toward the corner booth. But Robert didn't notice. His steel-gray eyes locked onto Kate's face, searching it with a sudden terrible recognition. "What did you say?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Kate swallowed, her professional demeanor cracking under his intense gaze. "The tattoo on your wrist. My mother has the same one, same design, same date." Robert's face turned to stone, his jaw clenched. The room suddenly felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. "You should leave," he said coldly. "Now." But Kate stood her ground, something stubborn and desperate flashing in her eyes. "My mother's name is Laura Taylor. She said she got it with someone she loved at Columbia before he disappeared." Robert's complexion drained of all color. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the attention their exchange had attracted. "Not here," he hissed, fishing a business card from his wallet. "Take this and go. You're fired." Kate took the card, blinking back sudden tears of anger. "Of course I am," she muttered, turning away just as the restaurant manager rushed over to address the situation. As Kate walked away, Robert's hand unconsciously moved to cover his tattoo, the mark he'd kept hidden from the world for 25 years. Earlier that morning, Robert Kane had stood in his $30 million penthouse overlooking Central Park. The pre-dawn light painted Manhattan in shades of deep blue and purple, the city's grid of lights still glimmering against the darkness. He watched the city wake up from 50 stories above a god's perspective. The private elevator announced an arrival with a discreet chime. Only 3 people had access: Robert, his housekeeper, and Victor Zhao. At 6 a.m., it could only be Victor. "You're early," Roberts said without turning around. Victor Zhao moved to stand beside him at the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 60, Victor maintained the lean physique and acute alertness that had served him well from humble beginnings in Queens to becoming one of Wall Street's most feared financial strategists. His perfectly tailored suit and round glasses projected calculated precision. Beautiful, isn't it? Victor said, gazing at the city. So peaceful from up here. You'd never know about the suffering below. Robert turned slightly. You didn't come at 6 in the morning to wax philosophical. Victor smiled thinly. We need to talk about Memorial Health. The Memorial Health acquisition represented Robert's most ambitious project, yet a struggling hospital system ripe for restructuring and optimization. While public opinion focused on the community service aspects, Robert and his board saw untapped real estate and service opportunities. The board meets this afternoon, Robert said. Is there a problem? Victor pulled out his iPad displaying financial projections. Not a problem, an opportunity. If we accelerate the closure of the underperforming clinics in low-income areas, quarterly projections improve by 18%. His finger traced the upward curve on the graph. Converting those facilities to premium concierge medical services in those developing neighborhoods would position us ahead of the gentrification curve. Robert frowned slightly. The public relations impact can be managed, Victor interrupted smoothly. We structure it as consolidation of services and emphasize the quality improvements at the remaining facilities. The media cycle will move on within a week. Robert nodded slowly, but something in his expression remained unconvinced. His hand unconsciously moved to his wrist fingers, tracing the outline of the tattoo beneath his sleeve. Victor noticed the gesture. He noticed everything but said nothing. There's something else, Victor said, his tone shifting subtly. Edward Blake has been meeting with some of our shareholders. Robert's expression hardened at the mention of his former colleague turned bitter rival. Which ones? Primarily the Westlake Group and Richardson Trust. Together with his existing allies, he's approaching the threshold needed to force board changes. Edward Blake, 58, had once been Robert's partner before an acrimonious split 15 years ago. Blake's ruthless approach had nearly bankrupted Kane Industries during the financial crisis. Now he ran Blake Consolidated, a conglomerate known for aggressive acquisitions and cost-cutting that often left communities devastated. Blake wants Memorial Health. Robert said not a question, but a statement. Victor nodded. His healthcare division has been underperforming. This would give him an immediate foothold in the Northeast market. Robert turned back to the window, his reflection grim against the brightening sky. He'll strip it for parts, close everything except the profitable specialist centers. Yes, Victor agreed, which is essentially our plan as well, just executed more discreetly. Robert didn't respond immediately. The city below was fully awake now, tiny figures moving through the concrete canyons, each with their own struggles and triumphs invisible from this height. Set up calls with our key shareholders before the board meeting, Robert finally said, and get me everything we have on Blake's recent activities. As Victor left, Robert remained at the window. His fingers again found their way to the compass tattoo on his wrist. 25 years ago, another version of himself had stood at a very different crossroads. He'd made his choice then, setting his course toward wealth and power. He'd never allowed himself to wonder about the road not taken. Until now. Kate Taylor entered the cramped two-bedroom apartment in Queens, dropping her purse on the worn kitchen counter. Getting fired from the Crystal Room meant losing the best-paying job she'd managed to find. The tips alone had been keeping them afloat. "Mom, I'm home early." The only response was a deep, rattling cough from the bedroom. Kate's shoulders sagged as she filled a glass with water and grabbed the orange prescription bottle from the counter. Laura Taylor sat propped up against pillows, a book forgotten in her lap. At 45, Laura still retained traces of the beauty that had once turned heads, but cancer had hollowed her cheeks and dulled the auburn hair she shared with her daughter. The overhead light caught the compass tattoo on her wrist as she reached for the water Kate offered. "You're home early," Laura observed, her voice raspy. "What happened?" Kate sat on the edge of the bed, buying time by adjusting her mother's pillows. "I got fired." Laura's eyes sharpened with concern. "Why, you just started there." "I saw something. Someone." Kate hesitated, then took her mother's hand, turning it to reveal the tattoo. "Mom, I met him. The man who has the matching tattoo." The glass slipped from Laura's fingers, water soaking into the bedsheets. Her face went pale, paler even than the pallor illness had given her. "What her?" The questions came out as barely a whisper. "At the restaurant. He's some big shot. Robert Kane." Laura closed her eyes, pain crossing her features that had nothing to do with her illness. Robert, she whispered the name like a prayer or a curse. Who is he, Mom? All these years you've never told me about him, about the tattoo. Laura's eyes remained closed. It doesn't matter anymore. It was another lifetime. It does matter. Kate stood up, frustration bubbling over. We're drowning in medical bills. I've had to drop out of school. Meanwhile, this guy wears a watch that could pay for your entire treatment. Kate, please. Laura was interrupted by another coughing fit, this one more severe than before. She hunched forward, each cough seeming to tear through her thin frame. Kate reached for the inhaler on the nightstand, but Laura waved it away, reaching instead for tissues. When she pulled them away from her mouth, they were spotted with blood. Mom, Kate's anger instantly transformed to panic. I'm okay, Laura managed unconvincingly. It happens sometimes. We're going to the hospital. Now. Laura tried to protest, but another wave of coughing left her too weak to resist as Kate called an Uber and helped her mother dress. 40 minutes later, they sat in the emergency room at Memorial Health, the very hospital system Robert Kane was planning to acquire. The irony wasn't lost on Kate as she filled out paperwork, leaving blank spaces next to questions about insurance coverage. The hours dragged on in the waiting room. Kate made calls, canceling her shift at the diner where she worked mornings. Another income source they couldn't afford to lose, but her mother's labored breathing left no choice. Finally, a doctor called them back. Dr. Sarah Wilson was in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering and practical hands that moved with experienced efficiency. The CT scan shows progression of the disease, she explained gently after examining Laura. The cancer has spread more rapidly than we anticipated. She needs surgery followed by an aggressive treatment protocol. Kate nodded, trying to process the information. When can we schedule it? Dr. Wilson hesitated. There's the matter of insurance coverage. We'll figure something out, Kate said firmly. How much are we talking about? The number, Dr. Wilson quoted made the room spin. $350,000. Might as well be $3 billion. There are some assistance programs, Dr. Wilson began, but Kate was already pulling out the business card Robert Kane had handed her. I might know someone who can help, she said, her voice hollow. As Dr. Wilson left to arrange for Laura's admission, Kate sat beside her mother's bed. Laura had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her breathing shallow and uneven. The hospital gown had slipped slightly, revealing the compass tattoo on her wrist. Kate stared at it, this symbol that had always been part of her mother's body, never knowing it was half of a match set, half of a story she'd never been told. She pulled out her phone and searched for Robert Kane. Thousands of results appeared instantly. CEO of Kane Industries, net worth estimated at $4.2 billion. Photos of him at charity galas, business conferences, cutting ribbons at building openings. In one photo, he stood beside a distinguished older Asian man, Victor Zhao, according to the caption. In another, he shook hands with the mayor. Nowhere was there mention of a Laura Taylor or a daughter. Kate looked from her phone to her sleeping mother, connecting the dots of their difficult life. The single mother struggling to provide. The mysterious tattoo and reluctance to discuss the past. The timing of it all. She didn't need a DNA test to know the truth. Robert Kane was her father. Michael Brooks had been Robert Kane's personal attorney for 30 years, since Robert was a hungry young entrepreneur and Michael a freshly minted Harvard Law graduate. At 60, Michael's once athletic frame had softened, but his mind remained razor sharp. Few people on earth knew Robert Kane as well as Michael did, which was why he immediately sensed something was wrong when Robert summoned him to the penthouse. You're missing your board meeting, Michael observed, accepting the scotch Robert offered. That's not like you. Robert stood at the window, still as a statue. I need your absolute discretion on this, Michael. As always, Robert turned, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. A young woman approached me today. She says her mother has the same tattoo as mine. From Colombia. Michael's eyebrows rose slightly. Laura, Robert nodded. The fact that Michael remembered the name after 25 years spoke volumes about the impact that relationship had had on Robert. What did this young woman want? Michael asked carefully. She didn't say. We were interrupted. Robert took a long drink. But she'd be the right age. Michael set his glass down. You think she might be your daughter? It wasn't a question, but Robert nodded anyway. If Laura kept the baby, the unspoken implications hung in the air between them. For decades, Robert had believed Laura had terminated the pregnancy as they'd agreed was necessary given their circumstances. He'd provided the money. She'd promised to take care of it. And then he disappeared from her life as his father had demanded. Charles Kane had been a tyrant in an expensive suit. Old money and older values, he'd seen Robert's relationship with a scholarship student as slumming at best, a threat to the Kane legacy at worst. When Laura became pregnant, Charles had issued an ultimatum: end it or be disinherited, blackballed from every financial institution in the country. At 20, faced with losing everything he had been raised to value, Robert had chosen his inheritance and his future. He told himself Laura would be better off too free to finish her education to find someone more suitable. I need you to find out everything you can about Kate Taylor and her mother Laura, Robert said. Michael pulled out his phone. I'll have my team start immediately. But Robert, consider the timing of this. The Memorial Health acquisition goes public next week. If this woman is looking for a payout, just find them, Robert interrupted. And Michael, this stays between us. Not even Victor can know. Michael looked surprised. You've trusted Victor with everything for 20 years. Robert's expression darkened. This isn't about business. This is about family. After Michael left, Robert canceled his remaining appointments and did something he rarely allowed himself. He thought about Laura. The memories came flooding back with surprising clarity. Her laugh, the way she'd challenge his privileged worldview, the tiny apartment they'd share takeout in while studying, and the tattoo. They'd gotten matching ones after 6 months together. A compass rose to symbolize finding their true north in each other and the date they'd met. June 14, 2000, a lifetime ago. The penthouse phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Victor calling about the board meeting Robert had missed. He let it go to voicemail. For the first time in 25 years, business would have to wait. Kate sat in the hospital cafeteria staring at the business card in her hand. Robert Kane, CEO, a direct number handwritten on the back. A nurse had convinced her to get some food while her mother underwent tests, but Kate couldn't bring herself to eat. Her entire worldview had shifted in the space of hours. The father she'd been told was a college boyfriend who'd left before she was born was actually one of the richest men in America. Had he known about her? Had he abandoned them deliberately? The questions churned in her mind alongside the immediate practical concern: could he help save her mother's life? Kate's phone buzzed with a text from her third job, a family asking if she could babysit tonight. She declined, knowing she couldn't leave the hospital. Another income source slipping away. Ms. Taylor. Kate looked up to see Dr. Wilson standing beside her table, a concerned expression on her face. Your mother is stable for now. We've admitted her for monitoring and started her on medication to help with the breathing. Thank you, Kate said. About the costs. Dr. Wilson sat down, her professional demeanor softening slightly. I understand your situation. Unfortunately, cases like your mother's are becoming more common here. What do you mean? Dr. Wilson hesitated. It's not public knowledge yet, but Memorial Health is being acquired by Kane Industries. They plan to restructure our services, which means closing clinics in lower-income areas and converting others to premium care models. Kate's heart sank. What happens to patients like my mother? They'll be transitioned to other facilities, Dr. Wilson said, making air quotes. But the reality is that many will fall through the cracks. The specialized treatment your mother needs isn't available at public hospitals. Kate looked down at the business card again. Kane Industries. The very company threatening her mother's care was owned by her biological father. When does this restructuring happen? The board votes next week. After that, changes will start immediately. Kate stood up, a new determination in her eyes. Thank you for telling me this. I need to make a call. She walked to the hospital garden, one of the few places where cell phones were permitted. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number on Robert Kane's card. It rang once before going to voicemail. A man's clipped, professional voice. This is Robert Kane. Leave a message. Kate took a deep breath. Mr. Kane, this is Kate Taylor from the Crystal Room. My mother is Laura Taylor, and she's currently a patient at Memorial Health. I believe we have matters to discuss that concern both of us. Please call me back at this number. She ended the call, uncertain if she'd said too much or too little. As she turned to go back inside, she noticed a tall figure standing at the hospital entrance, staring through the glass doors. Robert Kane, Their eyes met across the distance. For a moment, neither moved. Then Robert turned away, walking briskly toward a waiting black Bentley. Kate ran after him. "Wait," Robert paused, his hand on the car door. Up close, Kate was struck by how much older he looked than in his photos, not physically but in his eyes. Something haunted there. "Why are you here?" she demanded. "I wanted to see her," Robert said quietly. "To confirm. To confirm what, that she's really Laura. That I wasn't lying." Robert didn't answer directly. "How is she dying?" Kate said bluntly. "Cancer, stage 3. She needs surgery and treatment we can't afford." Robert winced slightly at her directness. "I can help with that. Can you, or will you just buy this hospital and shut down her treatment program?" Surprise flickered across Robert's face. "You know about Memorial Health. I know you're planning to restructure it into oblivion. Dr. Wilson told me." Robert's expression hardened. Dr. Wilson should be more careful about discussing confidential business matters. "She's trying to save her patients. Patients your company is going to abandon for profit." They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Kate saw her own green eyes reflected in his gray ones, and the recognition seemed to pass between them unspoken. "I want a DNA test," Robert finally said. Kate laughed bitterly. "Of course you do. Well, I want my mother to live. Seems like we both want something from each other." "I'll cover all medical expenses regardless of the test results," Robert said stiffly. "But I need to know the truth." Kate studied him, this stranger in an expensive suit who might be her father, who had abandoned her mother, who now held her mother's life in his hands through both his personal wealth and his business decisions. "Fine," she agreed. "But there's something else you should know. Your company isn't the only one interested in Memorial Health. I overheard Dr. Wilson talking about someone named Blake also making an offer." Robert's expression darkened. "Edward Blake," Kate shrugged. "I don't know, but they seemed worried about it." Robert pulled out his phone, suddenly all business again. "I need to go. I'll have my attorney contact you about the medical expenses and the DNA test." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for telling me about Blake." As he got into the Bentley, Kate called after him. "What was she to you, my mother?" Robert paused, one foot in the car. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the young man who had once gotten a matching tattoo with the woman he loved. "Everything," he said quietly. "She was everything." Then he was gone, leaving Kate standing alone outside the hospital, wondering if she'd just made a deal with the devil or found a path to salvation. Dr. Sarah Wilson watched the exchange between Kate Taylor and Robert Kane from the hospital entrance. At 50, Sarah had dedicated her life to Memorial Health, working her way up from resident to chief of oncology. The pending acquisition threatened everything she'd built and everything her patients needed. When Kane disappeared into his luxury car, Sarah approached Kate. "That was Robert Kane." Kate nodded, still staring after the departed vehicle. "He's an acquaintance of my mother's." Sarah's experienced eyes noted the similarities between Kate and the billionaire, the set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. She'd been a doctor too long not to recognize genetic markers. "Whatever connection you have to him, use it," Sarah said urgently. "Kane Industries will destroy this hospital as we know it. But Blake Consolidated would be even worse." "What do you mean?" Sarah glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Edward Blake has a history of converting hospitals into glorified research facilities. Experimental treatments, minimal charity care. There are rumors about ethical violations at his facilities in South America." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you just had a conversation with Robert Kane that didn't end with you being escorted off the property," Sarah said bluntly. "That gives you influence most people don't have." Kate laughed hollowly. "I'm a waitress with a high school diploma. I don't have influence over billionaires." Sarah placed a hand on Kate's arm. "You have something they want, or you wouldn't have been standing there talking to him. Figure out what it is and use it not just for your mother, but for all our patients." As Sarah returned to the hospital, Kate stood alone in the gathering dusk, the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. Somewhere in the gleaming tower of Kane Industries, decisions were being made that would affect thousands of lives, including her mother's. And somehow she was now part of that equation. Victor Zhao sat in his office on the 49th floor of Kane Tower, watching the city lights come alive as darkness fell. Unlike Robert's corner office with its panoramic views, Victor preferred a space where he could see without being seen. One-way glass, discrete entrances, and exit systems that recorded everything. His phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator. Kane met with Taylor Girl at Memorial Health. Confirmed mother is patient there. Victor allowed himself a small smile. For 10 years, he'd known about Laura Taylor and her daughter. Known and watched, keeping the information in reserve like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. Robert was brilliant at the bold moves of business, but Victor was the master of contingencies and leverage. A soft knock at his door preceded the entrance of his assistant. "Mr. Blake has arrived." Edward Blake entered with the confident stride of a predator. Where Robert Kane cultivated an image of sophisticated power, Blake embraced a more aggressive persona. His tailored suit couldn't quite conceal the street fighter beneath. At 58, he remained physically intimidating, with cold blue eyes that evaluated everything as a potential acquisition or threat. "This better be worth my time, Zhao," Blake said without preamble. Victor gestured to a chair. "I believe you will find it most valuable." "Drink," Blake declined with a gesture. "Just information. Your message said you have something that could help me acquire Memorial Health." "Not just acquire it," Victor corrected. "Acquire it while watching Robert Kane's carefully constructed image collapse." Blake's eyes narrowed with interest. "I'm listening." Victor slid a folder across the desk. "Robert Kane has a daughter he's never acknowledged. Her mother is currently a patient at Memorial Health, cancer stage 3. As of today, Robert is aware of her existence." Blake opened the folder, examining the surveillance photos and background reports. "How long have you known about this?" "Long enough." "And why offer this to me now? You've been Kane's right hand for 20 years. Victor smiled thinly. "Let's just say I'm interested in a change of direction. Kane Industries has become complacent under Robert's leadership. His focus on public image over maximizing shareholder value is a liability." Blake studied Victor with newfound respect. "You want my backing to take control of the company after Kane falls." "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial realignment of interests," Victor said smoothly. "You get Memorial Health and the satisfaction of defeating Robert. I get to reshape Kane Industries into a more profitable enterprise." "And the girl and her mother," Victor shrugged. "Collateral damage. Once they've served their purpose in destabilizing Robert, they become irrelevant." Blake closed the folder, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "I always knew you were ruthless, Zhao. I just thought your loyalty to Kane would override it." "My loyalty is to value creation," Victor corrected. "Robert has forgotten that principle. His sentimentality about this hospital system is proof of that weakness." As Blake left with the folder, Victor turned back to the window. In the reflection of the glass, he could see his own impassive expression. 20 years of being the loyal lieutenant, the trusted advisor, always one step behind Robert Kane. Always the executor, never the visionary. That was about to change. And Laura Taylor's daughter would be the unwitting catalyst. Laura Taylor's hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of supplemental oxygen. Morning light filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting gentle patterns across the institutional linoleum. Kate sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, her body curved into the unnatural posture of someone who had spent the night trying to sleep upright. A textbook on healthcare administration lay open in her lap, unread for hours. Laura stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Even weakened by illness, she immediately registered her daughter's exhaustion. "You should go home," she whispered. "Get some real sleep." Kate straightened, wincing at the stiffness in her neck. "I'm fine. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." Laura attempted a smile. "But breathing is easier." The medication was working, a temporary reprieve, not a solution. They both knew this. The unspoken reality of cancer hung between them, along with another unaddressed truth. "He was here yesterday," Kate said finally, "standing outside the hospital." Laura's gaze shifted to the window. "I dreamed about him. I thought it was just the medication." "It wasn't a dream. Robert Kane is very real and very rich." Kate hesitated. "Mom, I need to know the truth. All of it." Laura closed her eyes, her fingers unconsciously finding the tattoo on her wrist. For 25 years, she'd kept her secrets, protecting Kate from rejection, protecting herself from painful memories. But illness had a way of burning away pretenses, leaving only essential truths. We met at Columbia, she began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. I was on scholarship. He was Charles Kane's son, though you'd never know it from how he lived. He had this tiny apartment off campus, refused to use his family money, wanted to make it on his own terms. Kate listened, trying to reconcile this image with the powerful billionaire she'd encountered. We were so young, so sure we had everything figured out. A wistful smile crossed Laura's face. The tattoos were his idea, a promise that no matter where life took us, we'd always find our way back to each other, our true north. What happened? Kate pressed gently. Laura's smile faded. I got pregnant. We were 20 broke students with big dreams and no means to support a child. Robert panicked. His father threatened to cut him off completely, not just financially, but to use his influence to ensure Robert would never work in finance. So he chose money over you. It wasn't that simple, Kate. We were children playing at being adults. Laura's eyes met her daughter's. He gave me money for an abortion and disappeared. I intended to go through with it, I really did. But then I couldn't. I tried to find him afterward to tell him I was keeping the baby. But Charles Kane made sure those messages never reached his son. Kate's hands tightened around the textbook. You tried to contact him. Laura nodded. For almost a year. Letters, phone calls. Once I even went to the Kane building, but security wouldn't let me past the lobby. Eventually, I got a visit from Charles himself. What did he say? He threatened to have my scholarship revoked if I continued trying to contact Robert. Said he'd make sure I never finished my degree. Laura's voice hardened with the memory. He offered me a check to disappear permanently. I tore it up in his face. Kate felt tears welling up, imagining her young mother standing up to the powerful Charles Kane. So you raised me alone. And I have never regretted that decision for a single day, Laura said firmly, reaching for Kate's hand. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth about who my father really was? Laura's expression softened with sorrow. At first it was anger, then pride, then I didn't want you to feel rejected. To wonder why your father, who had everything, didn't want you in his life. I thought it was kinder to say he simply wasn't around. Kate was about to respond when a knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Wilson entered, followed by a distinguished older man in an expensive suit whom Kate recognized from her research, Michael Brooks, Robert Kane's personal attorney. Ms. Taylor, Mrs. Taylor, Michael greeted them professionally. I'm Michael Brooks representing Robert Kane. I hope I'm not interrupting. Kate stood protectively. What does he want? To help, Michael said, simply opening his briefcase and removing several documents. I've been instructed to set up a medical trust fund to cover all expenses related to Mrs. Taylor's treatment. No conditions, no repayment terms. Dr. Wilson looked as surprised as Kate felt. That would include the experimental immunotherapy we discussed. Michael nodded. Everything. The best care available for as long as necessary. Laura struggled to sit up straighter. Why would he do this after 25 years? That's a question for Mr. Kane, Michael replied diplomatically. But he wanted me to assure you that this assistance comes with no strings attached. He paused, glancing at Kate. The other matter we discussed, the DNA test, that remains your choice. The medical trust is established regardless. Kate felt conflicting emotions churning inside her. Relief that her mother would get the treatment she needed, suspicion about Robert's motives, and underneath it all, a lifetime of questions about the man whose blood might run through her veins. Where is he? She asked. Why send his lawyer instead of coming himself? Michael's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing genuine concern. Mr. Kane is dealing with some complicated business matters today. He asked me to express his regret at not being here personally, as Michael and Dr. Wilson discussed the medical details. Kate's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her breath catch. Power play, Blake consolidated moves to acquire Memorial Health System. The business battle Robert had been fighting was suddenly very real and directly connected to her mother's future. The Kane Industries boardroom hummed with tension. 14 board members sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces reflecting various degrees of concern and calculation. Robert Kane stood at the head of the table, outwardly calm despite the crisis unfolding. Blake's offer is leveraged to the hilt, he said, gesturing to the financial analysis displayed on the room's screens. He's offering a 15% premium over market value, but the structure would saddle Memorial Health with unsustainable debt. Victor Zhao sat at Robert's right hand, his expression unreadable. The offer has gotten the attention of our shareholders. The stock jumped 8 points this morning. Short-term thinking, Robert countered. Blake will strip Memorial Health for parts. The real estate alone in Manhattan. The boardroom doors swung open, interrupting Robert's presentation. Edward Blake walked in with the confident swagger of someone who believed he'd already won. Two of Blake's attorneys followed along with three Kane Industries board members who had clearly coordinated with Blake beforehand. "Sorry to interrupt," Blake said, not sounding sorry at all. "I thought this discussion should include all interested parties." Robert's jaw tightened. "This is a private board meeting, Edward." "Not anymore." Blake gestured to the three board members who had entered with him. "Messrs. Peterson, Watkins, and Greenberg have granted me proxy rights to represent their interests. Combined with the shareholders I already represent, that gives me standing to be here." The room erupted in murmurs. Robert shot a questioning look at Michael Brooks, who had just returned from the hospital. Michael gave an almost imperceptible nod. Legally, Blake's maneuver was sound. "Fine," Robert said coldly. "Since you're here, perhaps you'd like to explain how you plan to maintain Memorial Health's standard of care while servicing the debt your acquisition would create." Blake smiled, settling comfortably into an empty chair. "I'm not here to discuss operational details, Robert. I'm here to discuss leadership." He looked around the table. "Specifically, whether Kane Industries is being led by someone whose judgment is compromised." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Robert kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. How much did Blake know? "My judgment regarding Memorial Health is based on thorough market analysis and long-term value creation," Robert said evenly, "something your slash-and-burn approach tends to ignore." Blake's smile widened. "I'm not talking about your business judgment, Robert. I'm talking about personal matters affecting your objectivity." He opened a folder, deliberately taking his time. "Specifically, your previously undisclosed relationship with a current Memorial Health patient, Laura Taylor." The board members reacted with varying degrees of shock. Victor Zhao, Robert noted with growing suspicion, did not appear surprised at all. "My personal relationships are not board matters," Robert said firmly. "They become board matters when they influence multi-billion-dollar acquisitions," Blake countered. "They become board matters when the CEO of Kane Industries suddenly blocks a profitable restructuring plan to protect a woman he abandoned 25 years ago and their daughter." The word daughter rippled through the room like an electric shock. All eyes turned to Robert, whose composed exterior finally showed cracks. How did Blake know the DNA test results weren't even back yet? "You're making serious accusations without evidence," Michael Brooks interjected, stepping into the fray to protect his client. Blake turned to Victor. "Mr. Zhao, perhaps you can enlighten your colleagues about what you know regarding Ms. Taylor and her daughter." In that moment, Robert understood. The betrayal wasn't from an anonymous leak or Blake's investigation. It had come from within, from Victor, his right hand for 20 years. Victor met Robert's gaze, not bothering to deny his role. "I discovered Laura Taylor's connection to Robert approximately 10 years ago during routine background research for another matter. I kept the information confidential, believing it was in the company's best interest. Until now," Robert said quietly, the depth of the betrayal evident in his voice. Victor addressed the board rather than Robert. "I believe the board should be aware of this conflict of interest before making decisions about Memorial Health. Mr. Blake brought the matter to a head, but these facts would have emerged eventually." "The timing is certainly convenient," Michael observed dryly. Blake leaned forward, going for the kill. "The question, ladies and gentlemen, is simple. Can Robert Kane make objective decisions about Memorial Health when his unacknowledged daughter and former lover are directly affected by those decisions?" Robert surveyed the faces around the table. Some showed genuine concern. Others calculated interest in the power struggle playing out before them. Robert had spent decades building relationships with these people, earning their trust. But business was business, and sentiment rarely survived when billions were at stake. "I'd like to request a brief recess," Robert said, maintaining his composure through sheer force of will. "The board should have time to consider these matters without Mr. Blake's presence." Blake stood clearly pleased with the chaos he'd created. "Take all the time you need. My offer to the shareholders stands until noon tomorrow. After that, the premium disappears. He gathered his materials, adding casually, "Oh, and Robert, how is Laura? Cancer is such a terrible disease. I hope she's getting the best care possible." The threat was thinly veiled: side with me or watch Laura's care disappear when I take over. After Blake and his entourage departed, the boardroom erupted in overlapping conversations. Robert raised his hand for silence. "I'll address this directly," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Yes, I had a relationship with Laura Taylor 25 years ago. When we were students, yes, she has a daughter who may be mine. We're awaiting DNA confirmation. And yes, Laura is currently receiving treatment at Memorial Health for stage 3 lung cancer." He moved around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "But none of this affects the fundamental truth about Blake's offer. It's a predatory deal that will destroy Memorial Health as a functioning hospital system. The real estate play might boost our next quarterly report, but the long-term damage to this company's reputation and to healthcare in this city would be incalculable." Robert paused at Victor's chair, looking down at the man who had betrayed him. "Some of you might wonder if my judgment is clouded by personal connections. I would suggest that clarity sometimes comes precisely when business becomes personal, when we're forced to see the human consequences of our decisions." The board members exchanged glances, uncomfortable with this departure from the usual cold calculus of business decisions. "I need to step out," Robert concluded. "You should discuss this matter without me. But before you vote, I urge you to consider not just what Blake is offering, but what we'll be losing if we take it." As Robert left the boardroom, Victor followed him into the hallway. "Robert, this isn't personal." Robert turned, his controlled anger more frightening than an outburst would have been. "You've known about my daughter for 10 years and said nothing. You've been watching Laura, tracking her. That feels extremely personal from where I'm standing." "I was protecting the company," Victor insisted. "Your company. What would have happened if this had come out during the IPO or during the federal investigations in 2018? You weren't protecting anything except your own power," Robert said quietly. "How long have you been working with Blake?" Victor didn't deny it. "Edward approached me 3 months ago. His terms are generous." "I'm sure they are. And when he's done with you," Victor smiled thinly. "Unlike you, Robert, I've never been burdened by sentiment. Blake and I understand each other perfectly." Robert studied the man he'd trusted for decades, seeing him clearly for the first time. "You know what Blake will do to Memorial Health, to the patients, to the staff." "I know he'll maximize its value," Victor replied, "which is what we should have been doing it all along." Robert turned to leave, then paused. "Did you ever have anything you truly cared about, Victor? Anything beyond the bottom line?" For the briefest moment, something flickered in Victor's eyes. Perhaps regret, perhaps simply calculation. We're not all fortunate enough to have hidden daughters appear at convenient moments offering redemption. Robert walked away, leaving Victor alone in the hallway. The betrayal stung, but there was no time to dwell on it. Blake had forced his hand, accelerating a confrontation that Robert had hoped to approach more carefully. Now he needed to make a choice: the company he'd built or the family he'd abandoned. For the first time in 25 years, the answer wasn't immediately clear. Kate sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at her phone as she scrolled through articles about the emerging battle for control of Memorial Health. The business terminology was often opaque, but the stakes were crystal clear. Her mother's future and the futures of hundreds of other patients hung in the balance. "Mind if I join you?" Kate looked up to see Dr. Sarah Wilson holding a coffee cup. "Please." Sarah sat, studying Kate's troubled expression. "You've seen the news?" Kate nodded. "Blake Consolidated versus Kane Industries, with my mother caught in the middle. It feels surreal." "Welcome to American healthcare," Sarah said grimly, "where patients become data points in acquisition spreadsheets." Kate put down her phone. "What happens if Blake takes over?" "Best case, they close the underperforming departments, which means services for lower-income patients, and convert those resources to more profitable specialties. Worst case, they use us as a testing ground for experimental treatments, focusing on data collection rather than patient outcomes. And if Kane Industries maintains control," Sarah sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Originally, their plan wasn't much better. Close the community clinics, shift to concierge medicine in gentrifying areas. But rumor has it Robert Kane has been reconsidering that approach." Because of my mother, Kate said, the realization dawning on her. Possibly. Sometimes it takes a personal connection to see beyond the spreadsheets. Sarah hesitated, then added quietly, the resemblance between you two is striking, you know. Anyone with eyes can see it. Kate felt her cheeks flush. We don't know for sure yet. Don't we? Sarah's kind eyes held Kate's. Medicine teaches you to recognize patterns. The shape of the eyes, the jawline. Biology has its own signature. Before Kate could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Car waiting outside the main entrance. RK, Kate showed the message to Sarah. Should I go? Absolutely, Sarah said without hesitation. Right now, you might be the only person who can influence him. Use that. Kate gathered her things, suddenly uncertain. What do I even say to him? The truth, Sarah suggested. It's surprisingly effective with people who aren't used to hearing it. Outside the hospital's main entrance, a black Bentley idled at the curb, drawing curious glances from staff and visitors. The driver, a stone-faced man in his 50s, opened the rear door as Kate approached. Robert Kane sat inside, looking more human than he had in their previous encounters. His tie was loosened, his expression weary. The powerful CEO had been replaced by a man grappling with personal and professional crises simultaneously. Thank you for coming, he said as Kate slid into the leather seat beside him. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, entering Manhattan traffic. Kate noted they weren't heading toward Kane Tower. Where are we going? Nowhere in particular, Robert answered. I find it easier to have difficult conversations in moving vehicles. Fewer distractions, no eavesdroppers. Kate studied his profile, searching for traces of herself. The straight nose, the shape of the eyes. Features she'd always attributed to her mother suddenly appeared as inherited from this stranger. You've seen the news, Robert said, not a question, but a statement. Blake wants to take over Memorial Health, Kate confirmed, and he's using me and my mother as weapons against you. Robert nodded, his expression grim. Victor Zhao has been feeding him information. He's known about you for years, apparently. The man who was with you in the photos, your business partner, my closest advisor, or so I thought. A flash of pain crossed Robert's features. 20 years of trust gone in an instant. Despite herself, Kate felt a twinge of sympathy. Betrayal seems to run in your circles. Robert glanced at her sharply, then his expression softened with understanding. You mean my betrayal of your mother? Among other things. The car turned onto the FDR Drive, the East River glittering alongside them. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't entirely hostile either, just heavy with unspoken histories and questions. The DNA results came back, Robert finally said. I received them an hour ago. Kate's heart began racing, though the answer seemed increasingly obvious. And 99.8% probability, you are my daughter. Though she'd been preparing herself for this confirmation, hearing it stated so plainly made Kate's world tilt. For 25 years, her father had been an abstract concept, a college boyfriend who hadn't been ready for responsibility. Now he was flesh and blood, sitting beside her in a luxury car, worth more than everything she'd ever owned. Does it matter? She asked, surprising both of them with the question. You've lived your whole life without me. I've lived mine without you. Does knowing change anything? Robert turned to face her fully. It changes everything for me. Whether it changes anything for you, that's your decision to make. Why now? Because I found you, because my mother is sick, or because it suddenly affects your business interest? The questions were direct, almost brutal, but Robert didn't flinch. All of those reasons would be true and all of them insufficient. He looked out at the river. The honest answer is that I don't know yet. I've spent 25 years building a life designed to justify the choice I made, to prove that abandoning your mother was worth it because of what I accomplished instead. Now I'm being forced to reconsider that equation. His candor surprised Kate. She'd expected corporate doublespeak or emotional manipulation, not this raw uncertainty. Blake will destroy Memorial Health, Robert continued. He'll close the oncology department where your mother is being treated. He'll fire Dr. Wilson and replace the staff with contractors who'll prioritize data collection over patient care. And what was your plan before you knew about us? Any different? Robert had the grace to look uncomfortable. Not different enough. We would have maintained critical care services, but shifted resources toward more profitable specialties. The community clinics would have been closed. Those clinics serve people like us, Kate said, like my mother and me before you suddenly decided to help. I know. Robert's voice was quiet. It's easier to see numbers on a spreadsheet than faces in a waiting room. The car had completed a loop and was heading back toward the hospital. Their time was running short. What do you want from me? Kate asked directly. Nothing you don't want to give, Robert answered. But I need you to understand what's at stake with Blake's takeover attempt. It's not just about business rivalry or even about your mother's treatment. Blake's facilities have a troubling history of ethical violations using vulnerable patients for experimental protocols without proper oversight. Kate thought about Dr. Wilson's similar warnings. Why would the board choose his offer? Money, Robert said simply. Blake is offering a significant premium over market value. For shareholders focused solely on the next quarter's returns, it's an attractive proposition. And you can't match it. I could, Robert admitted, but it would mean leveraging Kane Industries to a dangerous degree. Kate processed this information, understanding the fundamental conflict. So either you risk the company you've built, or you let Blake take Memorial Health and potentially harm hundreds of patients, including my mother. Robert nodded, seemingly impressed by her quick grasp of the situation. That's the choice, unless we can find another option. Kate raised an eyebrow. Suddenly I'm part of your strategic planning. You found me for a reason, Robert said. You recognized the tattoo, you made the connection. That wasn't just coincidence. It was desperation, Kate corrected. My mother is dying and we couldn't afford treatment. And now, Kate looked out at the hospital as the car pulled up to the entrance. Now I don't know what to think. You abandoned my mother when she was pregnant. You built a fortune while we struggled. Now you're suddenly the good guy because you're fighting Edward Blake. Robert accepted her anger without defense. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Wade. I'm asking for your help in stopping Blake from destroying a hospital that hundreds of people depend on. Kate reached for the door handle, then paused. The trust fund for my mother's care, it's secure no matter what happens with Memorial Health. Completely separate, Robert confirmed. Blake can't touch it, and neither can I. It's irrevocable. Kate nodded, making her decision. I'll help you fight Blake, but not for you, for Dr. Wilson and the other patients who don't have billionaire fathers to rescue them. She fixed him with a hard stare. And let's be clear, this doesn't make us family. As Kate exited the car, Robert called after her. Kate, the DNA test results, do you want me to tell your mother or would you prefer to do it? Kate hesitated. I'll tell her. She's heard enough life-changing news from you for one lifetime. She walked away, feeling Robert's eyes on her back. The ground beneath her feet seemed less solid than it had that morning. Daughter of Robert Kane. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's life story. Inside the hospital, Kate made her way back to her mother's room, her mind racing with everything she'd learned. She found Laura awake, looking better than she had in weeks. The new medications were working, a small victory in what would be a long battle. I was getting worried, Laura said, setting aside the book she'd been reading. You've been gone for hours. Kate pulled a chair close to the bed, taking her mother's hand. I was with Robert Kane. The DNA test results came back positive. He's my father. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Kate. I should have told you the truth years ago. It's okay, Mom. Kate squeezed her hand. We're going to get through this. All of it. As they talked, neither noticed the figure standing just outside the door. Victor Zhao observing their reunion with calculating eyes before slipping away to make a phone call. She's with her mother now, Victor reported, and Kane has confirmed paternity. Edward Blake's voice came through the speaker. Excellent. Is he behaving as expected? Completely. He's considering leveraging Kane Industries to counter your offer. Perfect. Blake's satisfaction was evident even over the phone. When he overextends to save the hospital and his new family, will be perfectly positioned to step in and pick up the pieces. Victor ended the call, pocketing his phone. The pieces were falling into place exactly as planned. Soon, Kane Industries would have new leadership. Memorial Health would be transformed into a goldmine of medical data, and Victor Zhao would finally step out of Robert Kane's shadow. All it would cost was one hospital, one man's reputation, and perhaps a few expendable patients. In Victor's calculus, that was simply the price of progress. The offices of Kane Industries occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan. On the 50th floor, the executive suite had remained largely unchanged for 2 decades, a testament to Robert Kane's consistency and attention to detail. But at 2 in the morning, with the city's lights sparkling below like fallen stars, the office felt more like a war room than a corporate sanctuary. Robert stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection ghostly against the darkness beyond. Behind him, Michael Brooks reviewed documents spread across the conference table, his eyes red-rimmed from hours of strategic planning. 3 other trusted executives huddled around laptops, analyzing numbers, preparing contingencies. The shareholder vote is deadlocked, Michael reported, removing his glasses to rub tired eyes. Blake has 46% committed. We have 47. The remaining 7% belongs to trustees who haven't declared their intentions. Robert nodded without turning. In our counteroffer, the Melissa Chen, Kane Industries chief financial officer, looked up from her spreadsheets. We can match Blake's premium, but it would require leveraging Kane Industries at a 10-year high. The debt service would impact our operations for at least 3 quarters. Which Blake knows, Robert said. He's counting on us overextending, making ourselves vulnerable to a second move. It's a trap, agreed James Patel, head of strategy. Blake doesn't just want Memorial Health. He wants Kane Industries. The room fell silent as the true scope of their predicament settled over them. This wasn't just about a hospital acquisition anymore. It was an existential threat to everything Robert had built. There's another option, Michael said carefully. A personal purchase. Your family trust has sufficient liquidity to acquire Memorial Health without involving Kane Industries. Robert finally turned from the window. That would mean liquidating assets I've held for 30 years. Michael nodded, understanding the weight of the suggestion. Yes, but it would protect the company while securing Memorial Health. What remained unspoken was the personal cost to Robert, sacrificing a significant portion of his personal wealth assets that represented decades of careful investment. For a man who had chosen wealth over family 25 years ago, it represented a profound reversal of values. Get me the paperwork, Robert said after a long moment, and call Westridge Hospital Group in Boston. They specialize in nonprofit healthcare management. I want to discuss a potential partnership. As his team mobilized around the new strategy, Robert checked his phone. No messages from Kate. After their conversation in the car, he'd given her space, respecting her clear boundaries. But time was running out. Blake's offer to the shareholders expired at noon, less than 10 hours away. I'm going to the hospital, he announced, gathering his coat. Call me when the paperwork is ready. At this hour, Michael looked concerned. Blake never sleeps when he's closing in for a kill, Robert replied grimly. Neither should we. The night air was cool as Robert's driver navigated the relatively empty streets toward Memorial Health. In the back seat, Robert found himself touching the tattoo on his wrist, a habit that had resurfaced with startling frequency since Kate had appeared in his life. Memorial Health's main entrance was quiet the late hour, reducing the usual bustle to a skeletal night staff. Robert nodded to the security guard as he headed for the elevator, his frequent visits over the past week making him a recognized figure. On the oncology floor, the nurses' station was staffed by a single attendant who barely glanced up from her computer as Robert passed. He knew Laura's room number by heart, now 314, but as he approached, he saw light spilling from the open door and heard voices inside. The new immunotherapy is showing promising results, Dr. Wilson was saying. Your markers have improved significantly since we started treatment. Robert paused outside, not wanting to interrupt. And the long-term prognosis? Laura's voice stronger than it had been days ago. Let's focus on the current response, Dr. Wilson replied diplomatically. The treatment is working. That's what matters right now. Sarah, Laura's tone was gently chiding, we've known each other since nursing school. Don't doctor speak me. A sigh from Dr. Wilson. The cancer has responded better than I expected. If this continues, we're looking at months, possibly years of remission. Not a cure, but time. Good time. That's all anyone can ask for, Laura said, and Robert could hear the smile in her voice. Time to see my daughter graduate. Maybe time to meet grandchildren someday. The conversation shifted to medication schedules, and Robert was about to step away when Kate emerged from the room. She startled at the sight of him. What are you doing here? she asked, her voice low to avoid disturbing her mother. I needed to talk to you, Robert replied. About Memorial Health. Blake's offer expires at noon tomorrow. Kate glanced back at her mother's room, then motioned Robert toward a small waiting area at the end of the hall. Dr. Wilson says the treatment is working, she said as they sat in the institutional chairs. Mom has a chance now. I'm glad, Robert said sincerely. The trust will ensure she gets whatever treatment she needs regardless of what happens with Memorial Health. Kate studied him in the harsh fluorescent light. He looked older tonight, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders carrying a visible weight. You didn't come here at 2 in the morning just to tell me that. No, Robert admitted. I came because I'm making a decision and I thought you deserved to know about it first. He paused. I'm going to purchase Memorial Health personally separate from Kane Industries, then partner with a nonprofit healthcare group to manage it. Kate's eyes widened slightly. What does that mean exactly? It means liquidating a significant portion of my personal assets. It means Blake doesn't win. And it means Memorial Health continues serving patients like your mother. Why tell me? Robert considered the question carefully. Because it affects you. Not just your mother's care, but potentially your future. This decision will impact my estate, planning my legacy. Your legacy, Kate repeated, a hint of bitterness in the words. Is that what I am to you? Part of your legacy, planning? No, Robert said firmly. You're my daughter. Whether you want that relationship or not, it's a biological fact. And as my daughter, you should know when I make decisions that might affect you. Kate was silent for a long moment, processing his words. How much will this cost you? About 40% of my net worth. Significant, but not ruinous. Why not let Kane Industries handle it? Isn't that the more business-savvy approach? Robert smiled faintly. Probably, but Blake is expecting a corporate response. This move keeps the company protected while solving the immediate problem. Kate's expression remained skeptical. So it's still a business strategy, just a different one. Partly, Robert acknowledged, but it's also personal. I failed your mother 25 years ago. I failed you. I can't change that. But I can make different choices now. Before Kate could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. Her expression changed as she read it. What is it? Robert asked. Dr. Wilson. She says there's someone suspicious asking questions at the nurse's station. About my mother. About my... Kate stood quickly. We need to get back to her room. They hurried down the hallway, turning the corner to see a well-dressed Asian man speaking with a nurse outside Laura's room. Victor Zhao. What are you doing here? Robert demanded, stepping between Victor and the door. Victor smiled thinly. Just checking on Ms. Taylor's condition as an interested party in Memorial Health's future. Get out, Robert's voice was low but menacing. Now. Don't be dramatic, Robert. I'm simply gathering information same as you. Victor's gaze shifted to Kate. Mrs. Taylor, a pleasure to finally meet you properly. You look remarkably like your father. Kate stiffened at his familiar tone. You're the one who told Blake about me and my mother. Business is business, Victor said with a slight shrug. Nothing personal. In fact, I have a proposition that might interest you. Blake Consolidated is prepared to offer you a very generous settlement in exchange for your public support of their acquisition. You're trying to bribe me, Kate asked incredulously. I'm offering you financial security, something your father failed to provide for 25 years. Victor produced a business card. Think about it. Your mother's care is guaranteed either way. But with Blake's offer, you could complete your education, buy a nice home, start fresh. Robert stepped closer to Victor, his voice dangerously quiet. You have 5 seconds to leave before I call security. Victor pocketed the card unruffled. Consider the offer, Ms. Taylor. Unlike some promises, this one comes with actual cash attached. He nodded politely and walked toward the elevator. He's unbelievable, Kate said as they watched him leave. He's desperate, Robert corrected. Blake must be worried about our counter strategy if they're approaching you directly. Kate's phone buzzed again with another text. She read it with growing alarm. Dr. Wilson says there are lawyers from Blake Consolidated in the administrator's office reviewing patient files, including my mother's. Robert's expression darkened. They're looking for leverage, something they can use in the shareholder meeting tomorrow. He checked his watch. We need to move quickly. Is your mother stable enough to be transferred? Transferred to where? New York Presbyterian. I have connections there. We can have her moved before dawn, get her away from Blake's people. Kate hesitated, torn between concern for her mother and suspicion of Robert's motives. I need to talk to Dr. Wilson first. Of course, I'll make the calls to prepare for the possibility. As Kate went to consult with Dr. Wilson, Robert stepped away to make several urgent phone calls. The night had taken an unexpected turn, Blake making moves sooner than anticipated. The hospital, which should have been a place of healing, had become a battleground in their corporate war. 20 minutes later, Kate returned with Dr. Wilson beside her. We should move her, Dr. Wilson confirmed. Blake's lawyers are claiming audit rights as part of their due diligence. They're demanding access to specific patient files, including Laura's. Can they do that? Kate asked. Technically, they shouldn't have access to identifiable patient information without consent, Dr. Wilson explained, but they're pressuring administration with threats about the acquisition. I don't trust them. Robert nodded grimly. New York Presbyterian is preparing a room. I've arranged for a private ambulance. We can have her transferred within the hour. Dr. Wilson looked impressed despite herself. That usually takes days to arrange. Not when you've donated a wing, Robert said without elaboration. While Dr. Wilson went to prepare Laura for transfer, Kate and Robert stood in uncomfortable silence outside her room. Thank you, Kate finally said, for helping her. Robert nodded, accepting her gratitude without pressing for more. It's the least I can do. Why is Blake so interested in my mother's file specifically? What could possibly be in there that would help his acquisition? It's not about the medical information, Robert explained. It's about establishing a pattern of conflict of interest. If they can prove I've been directing special resources to Laura's care, it strengthens their case that I'm making business decisions based on personal factors. But you establish the trust through your attorney, not through Kane Industries. A distinction that would get lost in the headlines they're planning to release, Robert said grimly. Kane CEO diverts resources to secret love child's mother. Kate winced at the tabloid framing. This is insane. This is business at Blake's level. Ruthless, personal, and without boundaries. Robert's phone chimed with a message. The ambulance is 5 minutes out. We should get your mother ready. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Laura, groggy but alert, was transferred to the private ambulance with Dr. Wilson accompanying her. Kate rode with her mother while Robert followed in his car. By 5 in the morning, Laura was settled in a private suite at New York Presbyterian, the dawn light beginning to illuminate the Manhattan skyline outside her window. You should get some rest, Robert told Kate as they stood in the hallway outside the new room. Today is going to be challenging. Kate looked exhausted but determined. What's your plan for the shareholder meeting? I'll present our counteroffer, personal purchase partnership with Westridge, preservation of critical services. Robert hesitated. Kate, there's something else you should know. My father, your grandfather, is involved in this situation as well. Kate looked surprised. I thought he was dead. No, Charles Kane is very much alive. 85 and living in isolation in Connecticut, but still a force to be reckoned with. Robert's expression tightened. He owns a significant block of Memorial Health stock through a shell company. I discovered it yesterday. The man who threatened my mother, who made you choose between her and your inheritance. Kate's voice rose with indignation. The same, Robert confirmed. I'm going to see him this morning before the shareholder meeting. He might be the key to blocking Blake's offer. Kate absorbed this information, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I want to come with you. Robert looked surprised. To meet Charles, I don't think that's a good idea. He's difficult even on his best days. He's my grandfather. He's the reason I grew up without a father. The reason my mother struggled alone. Kate's determination was evident in her posture. I want to look him in the eye. Robert studied his daughter, seeing in her the same stubborn resolve he recognized in himself. It won't be pleasant. Nothing about this situation is pleasant, Kate replied, but I'm part of it now, whether any of us wanted it this way or not. After ensuring Laura was comfortable and well cared for, Robert and Kate departed for Connecticut. The morning traffic was beginning to build as they left the city, but the Bentley moved smoothly in the capable hands of Robert's longtime driver. Tell me about him, Kate said as they crossed into Connecticut. About Charles. Robert gazed out at the passing landscape. Charles Kane built his fortune in the 70s and 80s, real estate primarily, but with diverse interests. He was brilliant driven, utterly ruthless in business. His voice softened slightly, and completely dedicated to his vision of the Kane legacy. What about as a father? Robert's smile was without humor. Charles viewed parenting as an extension of business. I was an investment expected to provide appropriate returns. Affection was conditional on performance. And your mother? She died when I was 12. Cancer, ironically enough. Robert's hand moved unconsciously to his tattoo. Charles remarried a year later, a strategic alliance with the daughter of another business family. It lasted 3 years. Kate tried to reconcile these details with her own upbringing, struggling financially but never doubting her mother's unconditional love. When I met your mother at Columbia, Robert continued, it was the first time I'd experienced a relationship based on genuine connection rather than utility. Laura saw me not the Kane heir, not a strategic alliance. Just me. Then why did you leave her? The question had been building in Kate since their first encounter. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Because I was 20 years old and terrified. Because Charles threatened to destroy not just my future, but Laura's as well. And because, if I'm truly honest, part of me believed him when he said love wasn't enough to build a life on. The last admission hung between them as the car turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees. At the end stood Oakenhurst, the Kane family estate, a sprawling colonial mansion set amid manicured grounds. He lives here alone, Kate asked as they approached, with a staff of 6, cook, housekeeper, nurse, gardener, security, and personal assistant. But no family, no friends, just Charles and his empire. The Bentley pulled up to the main entrance where a silver-haired woman in a professional suit waited on the steps. Ms. Preston, Robert greeted her as they exited the car. Is he expecting us? He's expecting you, the assistant replied, her gaze moving curiously to Kate. He didn't mention a guest. This is Kate Taylor, my daughter. Ms. Preston's professional composure cracked slightly with surprise before she recovered. I see. He's in the study. You know the way. Robert led Kate through the mansion's imposing foyer and down a corridor lined with oil paintings of stern-looking men, Kane patriarchs of previous generations. The house smelled of furniture polish and old money, the silence broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock. The study door was closed. Robert knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. Charles Kane sat behind an antique desk, the morning light from tall windows illuminating his austere features. At 85, he remained an imposing figure, thin but straight-backed. His white hair perfectly groomed, his eyes sharp with intelligence, undiminished by age. He wore a tailored suit despite being at home, a concession to standards rather than comfort. Robert, he acknowledged without warmth. You're early. His gaze shifted to Kate, narrowing with instant recognition. And you've brought her. Kate Taylor, Robert said formally. My daughter, your granddaughter. Charles studied Kate with clinical detachment. The resemblance is unmistakable. Kane features particularly around the eyes. Your mother's coloring, though. Kate stood her ground under his scrutiny. Mr. Kane, Charles gestured to the chairs opposite his desk. Sit, since you've come all this way. As they sat, Charles pressed a button on his desk. Preston, bring coffee. He released the button without waiting for acknowledgement. I assume this visit concerns Edward Blake's offer for Memorial Health. You know about that? Robert said. I know everything about Kane Industries, Charles replied, including your current predicament. Blake has you backed into a corner. Which is why we're here, Robert said. You own 12% of Memorial Health through Oakenhurst Holdings. Charles's expression didn't change. 14%, actually. I acquired additional shares last quarter. 14% that could block Blake's offer if voted with our position. Robert leaned forward. I'm prepared to make you an offer for those shares. Charles smiled thinly. At my age, Robert, money holds limited appeal. I have more than I could spend in a dozen lifetimes. Then what do you want? The old man's gaze moved to Kate. A conversation, privately, with my granddaughter. Robert stiffened. Absolutely not. It's fine, Kate interjected. I'll talk with him. Kate, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she said firmly. 14% means my mother's treatment. It means hundreds of other patients. I can handle a conversation. Charles's smile widened slightly. She has the Kane resolve, I'll give her that. He looked at Robert. Wait outside, we won't be long. Robert hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. Kate, it's okay, she assured him. Really. After Robert reluctantly departed, closing the study door behind him, Charles and Kate regarded each other in silence. Grandfather and granddaughter meeting for the first time after 25 years of separation. So, Charles finally said, Laura Taylor's daughter, the child that was supposed to be eliminated before it complicated the Kane bloodline. Kate refused to be provoked. Yes, the complication that turned out to be a human being. Charles chuckled, a dry sound with minimal humor. Direct, that's good. I detest prevarication. He studied her more carefully. You have an associate's degree in business administration. You've worked continuously since age 16. No criminal record, good credit despite modest income. Responsible. You've investigated me, Kate said, unsurprised. Thoroughly, I investigate everyone who enters the Kane orbit. Charles leaned back in his chair. Your mother raised you well despite limited resources. She did everything for me, Kate said fiercely, while your son built an empire and you enjoyed your wealth. Yes, Charles agreed, unconcerned by her accusation. That was the arrangement. The arrangement, you threatened to destroy her life if she didn't disappear. Charles waved a dismissive hand. Theatrics. I presented her with reality. A 20-year-old girl pregnant with no family support and a partial scholarship. Her prospects were limited at best. Robert was the Kane heir with responsibilities to match. Their relationship was a youthful indulgence, nothing more. It was more to her, Kate said, and I think it was more to him too. Perhaps, Charles allowed, but sentiment makes for poor business strategy. Is that why you're alone in this mausoleum? Great business strategy? For the first time, Charles's composure flickered. Something anger passed across his features before the mask returned. I built an empire, he said quietly. That was my purpose. Robert was meant to expand it. Instead, he's jeopardizing it for sentiment. Ms. Preston entered with coffee, setting the silver service on the desk before departing silently. Neither Kate nor Charles touched it. Why did you want to speak with me alone? Kate asked. Curiosity primarily. I wanted to see what kind of person emerged from this unfortunate situation. Whether the Kane genetics manifested despite the disadvantaged upbringing. And your assessment, Charles's lips curved in what might almost have been a genuine smile. You'll do. Kate waited for elaboration, but none came. That's it. You'll do. After 25 years of absence, that's all you have to say to your only grandchild. What would you prefer? Empty apologies. Tearful reconciliation. I'm 85 years old, Ms. Taylor. I don't have time for sentimentality. Then let's talk business, Kate said, shifting tactics. You own 14% of Memorial Health stock. Blake wants it. Robert wants it. What do you want for it? Charles's eyebrows rose slightly, approval flickering in his cold eyes. Direct and pragmatic. Very good. He considered her question. What I want is assurance that the Kane legacy continues, that all I've built doesn't end with Robert's generation. Because you're dying, Kate realized suddenly. That's why you're suddenly interested in me. You're facing mortality. Charles didn't deny it. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The irony isn't lost on me. Does Robert know? No, and you won't tell him. That's my first condition. Kate studied the old man before her. Despite his age and apparent illness, power radiated from him, the habit of command ingrained over decades. What are your other conditions? She asked. You will take the Kane name legally publicly. You will accept a position within Kane Industries to be trained as Robert's eventual successor. And you will sign an agreement binding your future children to the Kane Trust, ensuring the continuation of the bloodline. Kate stared at him, incredulous. You're not serious. Entirely serious, Charles said calmly. In exchange, I will vote my Memorial Health shares according to Robert's wishes, blocking Blake's acquisition. I will also amend my will to include you as a primary beneficiary of the Kane Family Trust, approximately $3 billion in assets separate from Kane Industries. The magnitude of the offer momentarily robbed Kate of speech. $3 billion, more money than she could comprehend. You barely know me, she finally said. I know you're a Cain, Charles replied simply. Intelligent, determined, resilient. The rest is trainable. And if I refuse, then I sell my shares to Blake, who has already made a generous offer. Memorial Health transforms into a testing facility for experimental treatments, and your mother loses her current care protocol. Charles sipped his coffee. Business, Miss Taylor, not personal. Kate stood needing physical distance from the old man and his monstrous bargain. This is what you did to them 25 years ago. Forced an impossible choice with lives hanging in the balance. Similar though the stakes are higher now. Charles set down his cup. You have until noon to decide, when the shareholders vote. Robert won't accept this arrangement. Robert doesn't need to know the details, only that you've convinced me to support his position. Charles's expression softened fractionally. He was always too sentimental for his own good. Even as a child, it made him vulnerable. It made him human, Kate countered. Charles smiled thinly. A luxury in our position. He pressed the button on his desk. Preston, please show Ms. Taylor out. Our business is concluded for now. Outside the study, Robert was pacing the hallway. He looked up anxiously as Kate emerged. What happened? What did he say to you? Kate hesitated, Charles's offer weighing on her. He's dying, cancer. Robert's expression shifted from concern to shock. What? Why wouldn't he tell me? Because he's using it as leverage, Kate said, deciding that partial truth was necessary. He'll support your position on Memorial Health, but he has conditions. What conditions? Kate avoided his gaze. He'll discuss them with you privately, but he's agreed to vote against Blake. Robert studied her, sensing she was withholding information. Kate, whatever he offered or threatened you with, it's fine, she interrupted. Really, we should go. The shareholder meeting is in 3 hours. As they walked back toward the entrance, Robert placed a gentle hand on her arm. My father is a master manipulator. He finds leverage and exploits it ruthlessly. Whatever he said to you, remember that. Kate nodded, unable to explain that Charles's manipulation extended far beyond their private conversation, that he was orchestrating all of them like pieces on a chessboard, ensuring the Cain legacy continued according to his design, no matter who won today's battle. The drive back to Manhattan passed in relative silence, both lost in their thoughts. Robert made calls to his team confirming details for the shareholder meeting. Kate texted with Dr. Wilson getting updates on her mother's condition at New York Presbyterian. As they approached the gleaming tower of Cain Industries, Kate finally spoke. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that I don't blame you anymore. Not entirely. Robert looked at her in surprise. What changed your mind? Meeting Charles, Kate said simply. Seeing what you were up against at 20, understanding the forces that shaped you. That doesn't excuse my choices, Robert said quietly. No, but it helps explain them. Oh, Kate gazed up at the imposing building. He built all this for you, his legacy. His prison, Robert corrected. A beautiful golden prison that I willingly walked into. The Bentley pulled into the private underground garage where Michael Brooks was waiting, his expression grave. Blake moved up the meeting, he reported as they exited the car. It starts in 20 minutes. The boardroom is already full. He's trying to catch us unprepared, Robert said, straightening his tie. It won't work. As they rode the executive elevator to the 50th floor, Kate felt strangely calm despite the high-stakes drama unfolding around her. 24 hours ago, she'd been a waitress worried about her mother's medical bills. Now she was ascending to a corporate boardroom where billions of dollars and hundreds of lives hung in the balance. You don't have to come in, Robert told her as the elevator approached their floor. This could get ugly. Kate met his gaze directly. I'm a Cain, remember I can handle ugly. Something like pride flickered in Robert's eyes before the elevator doors opened, revealing the battlefield that awaited them. The Cain Industries boardroom buzzed with tension as Robert entered with Kate and Michael beside him. Edward Blake sat at the far end of the table, a position traditionally reserved for visitors rather than principals, a subtle power play that fooled no one. Victor Zhao sat at Blake's right hand, his betrayal now public and complete. Robert, Blake greeted him with false warmth. And Ms. Taylor, how kind of you to join us for this historic occasion. The only historic occasion today will be your retreat, Edward, Robert replied calmly, taking his seat at the head of the table. I believe we're still scheduled for noon. The majority of voting shareholders are present now. Blake said smoothly. Why delay the inevitable? Kate surveyed the room, recognizing the lines of battle. On Robert's side sat Michael Brooks, Melissa Chen, and 4 board members who had maintained their loyalty. On Blake's side were Victor and the 3 board members who had granted him proxy rights, along with 2 others who must have been swayed by recent events. Very well, Robert said, his composure unshaken. Let's proceed. The next hour unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Blake presented his offer for Memorial Health, emphasizing the premium price and potential for operational efficiencies that would benefit shareholders. Victor provided financial projections that Kate, even with her limited business education, recognized as aggressively optimistic. Robert countered with his own proposal, a personal purchase of Memorial Health, separate from Kane Industries, followed by a partnership with Westridge Hospital Group to maintain critical services while improving financial performance. As the presentations concluded, Blake played his final card. Before we vote, he said, there's an important disclosure the board should consider. He opened a folder dramatically. It has come to light that Robert Kane has been utilizing Kane Industries' resources to benefit a previously undisclosed biological daughter, Ms. Catherine Taylor, present with us today, and her mother, Laura Taylor, currently receiving preferential treatment at Memorial Health. Murmurs rippled around the table. This conflict of interest, Blake continued, raises serious questions about Robert's judgment and his ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions. Can we trust him to make objective decisions about Memorial Health when his own family members are directly affected? Robert remained calm. Ms. Taylor was unknown to me until 1 week ago. Her mother is receiving treatment funded through a personal trust entirely separate from Kane Industries. There is no conflict of interest. A convenient arrangement established only after the connection was discovered, Victor interjected. The timing suggests an attempt to cover up the conflict rather than address it transparently. Michael Brooks stood, his legal training evident in his precise diction. The trust was established properly and independently. Mr. Kane's personal relationships have no bearing on the business decision before this board. The debate continued, growing increasingly heated. Kate watched silently, struck by the realization that her existence, her very DNA, had become a weapon in this corporate war. She was both central to the conflict and completely peripheral to the actual business decision. Finally, the board chairman called for the vote. The question before us is simple. Do we accept Blake Consolidated's offer for Memorial Health, or do we proceed with Mr. Kane's alternative proposal? As the roll call began, Kate's phone buzzed with an incoming call from New York Presbyterian. She slipped out of the room to answer it. Kate, it's Dr. Wilson. Your mother's asking for you. She's agitated about being moved and her oxygen levels are dropping. I think you should come. I'll be there as soon as possible, Kate promised, ending the call just as the boardroom door opened. Robert emerged, his expression unreadable. The vote, she asked. Deadlocked, he replied. Charles's proxy vote hasn't arrived. Without it, we're at an impasse. Kate closed her eyes briefly. Charles was playing them all, waiting until the last possible moment to extract maximum leverage. I need to get to the hospital, she said. My mother's condition has worsened. Robert nodded. I'll have my driver take you. I need to stay and deal with this situation. What will happen if Charles doesn't vote his shares? Blake wins by default, Robert said grimly. The offer expires at noon. Without a clear counter, the board will accept his terms. Again, as they spoke, Blake exited the boardroom, his confident stride suggesting a man who believed victory was within reach. He nodded to them with mock politeness. Family emergency, he asked, noting Kate's distress. How inconvenient, though I suppose Miss Taylor will soon have ample resources to address such concerns. What's that supposed to mean? Robert demanded. Blake smiled. Your father reached out this morning. We had quite an illuminating conversation about the future of the Kane legacy. His gaze shifted to Kate. All of it. As Blake walked away, Robert turned to Kate. What is he talking about? What did Charles say to you? Kate hesitated, torn between truth and the urgent need to reach her mother. Charles offered me a deal. The Kane name, a position in the company, and a place in the family trust, in exchange for his support against Blake. And you agreed, Robert looked stunned. I didn't agree to anything, Kate said. But he made it clear his support depends on my answer. Robert ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. This is exactly how he operates, using people against each other, creating impossible choices. I need to get to Mom, Kate said urgently. We can deal with Charles later. Robert nodded, his expression resolving into determination. Go. I'll handle this. As Kate hurried toward the elevator, Robert called after her. Kate, whatever happens with Memorial Health, with Charles, with any of this, you're my daughter. Nothing changes that now. Kate paused, struck by the simple declaration. 25 years of absence followed by a week of chaos, and yet in that moment, something fundamentally shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. Acknowledgement of a bond that transcended the current crisis. I know, she said softly. Then the elevator arrived and she was gone, racing to her mother's side, while the fate of Memorial Health and perhaps the Kane legacy itself hung in the balance behind her. At New York Presbyterian, Kate found her mother's condition stabilized but fragile. Dr. Wilson had administered additional oxygen and medication to ease Laura's breathing. The transfer was difficult for her, Dr. Wilson explained as they stood outside Laura's room. But she's responding well to treatment now. Thank you, Kate said, squeezing the doctor's arm gratefully, for everything. Inside the room, Laura lay against white pillows, her face pale but her eyes alert. She smiled when Kate entered. There you are, she said softly. Sarah told me you went with Robert. Kate took her mother's hand, settling into the chair beside the bed. We went to see his father, my grandfather. Laura's expression tightened. Charles Kane. He's dying, Kate said, watching her mother's reaction carefully. Cancer like you. A complex emotion crossed Laura's face, not quite satisfaction, but not sympathy either. The universe has a strange sense of justice. He made me an offer, Kate continued, needing to share the burden of this decision. He'll block Blake's takeover of Memorial Health if I agree to become part of the Kane family officially. Take the name work at the company, continue the legacy. Laura's grip tightened on Kate's hand. And what do you want? I want you to get better, Kate said immediately. I want the other patients at Memorial Health to keep their care. I want... She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate the confusing mix of anger, longing, and pragmatism churning inside her. You want a father? Laura finished gently. The family you never had. There's no shame in that, Kate. After everything he did to you, to us. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I've spent 25 years being angry at Robert Kane. It didn't change anything except making my heart heavier. She squeezed Kate's hand. Don't make your decisions based on revenge or loyalty to me. Make them for you. Kate's phone buzzed with a text from Robert, Charles still silent, Blake pushing for immediate vote, time running out. The clock on the wall showed 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes until Blake's offer deadline. Kate looked at her mother, thinking of all the sacrifices Laura had made dropping out of college, working multiple jobs, putting Kate's needs before her own. Always. I need to make a call, she said, kissing her mother's forehead before stepping into the hallway. She dialed Charles Kane's private number provided during their meeting that morning. He answered on the first ring as if expecting her call. Ms. Taylor? I'll accept your offer, Kate said without preamble, with 3 conditions of my own. A pause, then what sounded almost like a chuckle. Go on. First, the board of the restructured Memorial Health will include Dr. Sarah Wilson and a patient advocacy group. Second, my mother receives the best care available anywhere in the world for as long as she needs it. Kate took a deep breath. And third, you tell Robert the truth about your illness. Today. Interesting, Charles said. The first 2 are reasonable. The third is unnecessary. It's non-negotiable, Kate insisted. I won't begin a relationship with Robert based on lies. That's your way, not mine. A longer pause. Very well, I accept your terms. The proxy vote will be submitted immediately. Thank you, Kate said, feeling oddly formal. Don't thank me, ETD, Charles replied. This is business. Welcome to the family, Ms. Kane. The line went dead. Kate stood in the sterile hospital hallway, wondering if she'd just saved hundreds of patients, or sold her soul, or perhaps both. Her phone buzzed immediately with a text from Robert. Charles voted with us. Blake's offer rejected. How did you do it? She didn't respond, instead returning to her mother's room to sit with her until the sedatives took effect and Laura drifted into sleep. Only then did Kate allow herself to acknowledge the magnitude of the choice she'd made. 3 hours later, Robert arrived at the hospital looking simultaneously triumphant and exhausted. He found Kate in the small garden courtyard where patients could enjoy fresh air and greenery. "We won," he said, sitting beside her on a concrete bench. Blake withdrew his offer after the vote. His shareholders are already questioning the strategy. And Memorial Health. Safe. The personal purchase goes through tomorrow. Westridge is already assembling their management team. Robert studied her face. "You made this happen. Somehow you convinced Charles." Kate met his gaze. "I agreed to his terms." Robert's expression darkened. Which were, "I take the Kane name, join the company. Become part of the legacy he's so obsessed with preserving." "Kate, you don't have to." "I already agreed," she interrupted. "And so did he. It's done." Robert ran a hand over his face. "This is exactly what he does. Manipulates people with impossible choices." "It wasn't impossible," Kate said calmly. "Just difficult. 300 patients at Memorial Health keep their care. My mother gets the treatment she needs. And she paused, "I get a chance to know my father, to understand where I come from." Robert looked at her with a mixture of guilt and gratitude. "I don't deserve that chance." "Probably not," Kate agreed. "But we rarely get what we deserve in life. Sometimes we get more, sometimes less." She pulled her phone from her pocket. "Charles should be calling you soon. He has something important to tell you." As if on cue, Robert's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then at Kate. "You should take that," she said, standing to give him privacy. "I'll be with Mom if you need me." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Kate stood at the podium in the newly renovated lobby of what was now called Taylor Kane Medical Center. Behind her sat her mother, looking stronger than she had in years, though oxygen tubes still ran discreetly to her nose. Beside Laura sat Robert, their relationship civil, if not warm. Charles Kane was conspicuously absent, his health having deteriorated rapidly in recent months. Today marks not just the opening of a renovated facility. Kate addressed the gathered staff, patients, and press, but a new approach to healthcare in our community. She gestured to the building around them. "This center will continue to provide cutting-edge treatment to all patients regardless of their ability to pay. Our research division will focus on treatments for underserved populations and conditions that have received inadequate attention from profit-driven institutions." Kate, now officially Catherine Kane on her business cards and office door at Kane Industries, had spent the past months immersed in both the family business and the medical center transition. Her dual role as Director of Community Investment at Kane Industries and Chair of the Patient Advocacy Board at the Medical Center bridged worlds that had once seemed irreconcilably separate. "None of this would be possible without the vision and support of many individuals," she continued. "Dr. Sarah Wilson, whose medical leadership guides our care protocols. The Westridge Group, whose nonprofit management expertise ensures our financial sustainability. And the Kane Foundation, whose endowment guarantees that no patient will ever be turned away for lack of funds." As she spoke, Kate caught Robert's eye in the audience. Their relationship remained complicated, too much history and hurt for instant healing, but they were finding a path forward. Weekly dinners. Occasional weekend visits to the Connecticut estate, now mostly empty, as Charles received hospice care. Small steps toward a connection neither had expected to form. But most of all, Kate concluded, her voice softening, "I want to thank the patients and families who trust us with their care. Your courage inspires our work every day." After the ceremony, as staff and visitors mingled over refreshments, Kate found herself standing between her parents near the large windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The three of them together for the first time as a family, albeit an unconventional one. "The oncology wing looks remarkable," Laura commented, having toured it earlier. "Better equipment than most private hospitals." "Charles insisted," Robert said. "His last major project." Kate noticed how Robert's hand moved unconsciously to his wrist, touching the tattoo hidden beneath his sleeve. Laura's identical tattoo was visible on her wrist as she adjusted her oxygen tube. "He told me about your conversation that day," Robert said to Kate. "About the deal you made." Kate tensed slightly. And I realized something important." Robert's gaze moved between Kate and Laura. "For 25 years, I believed I made a choice between family and legacy, between love and success." He shook his head. "Charles convinced me they were mutually exclusive." "Weren't they?" Laura asked. "No," Robert said simply. "They never were. That was the lie he told us both. That we had to choose." He looked at Kate. "You proved that wrong. You found a way to have both." Kate thought about the past 6 months, the long hours at Kane Industries, the weekends at the medical center, the evenings studying for the business degree she'd finally returned to complete. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. I had good examples, she said. A mother who showed me love without limits, and a father who eventually showed me that it's never too late to make different choices. As they stood together in the warm autumn light, Kate realized that legacy wasn't just about names on buildings or billions in trust funds. It was about the choices we make, the impact we have, the connections we forge despite all odds. A year later, Kate stood in the private cemetery on the grounds of the Kane estate. Charles had died the previous winter, his funeral attended by business associates rather than friends, his eulogies focusing on achievements rather than relationships. The empire builder had passed from the world as he had lived in it, respected but not beloved. Robert stood beside her at the grave, his hair grayer now, his posture less rigid than it had once been. The past year had changed him in subtle but significant ways. He worked fewer hours, smiled more easily, called Laura weekly to check on her health, attended Kate's MBA classes when his schedule allowed. He got what he wanted in the end, Robert said, looking at his father's headstone. The Kane legacy continues. Not the way he expected, Kate replied. In her pocket was the latest scan from Laura's oncologist, a full year in remission, a minor miracle according to Dr. Wilson. On her wrist, partially visible beneath her sleeve, was a small tattoo she'd gotten the previous month, a compass rose like her parents, but with a different date. The day she'd chosen to accept both sides of her heritage to become Kate Taylor Kane. No, Robert agreed, not the way he expected at all. They turned away from the grave together, walking back toward the main house where Laura waited for them. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, red and gold and vibrant, with life even in their falling. Do you regret it? Robert asked suddenly. The deal you made with him? Kate considered the question. Sometimes. The strings attached the manipulation. It was quintessential Charles. She shrugged. But then I think about the 300 patients still receiving care, about Mom's remission, about the research we're funding, and about us, Robert ventured carefully. This awkward attempt at being family. Kate smiled, genuine and warm. That part I don't regret at all. As they approached the house, Kate could see her mother through the window, sitting comfortably in a chair that once belonged to Robert's mother. 3 generations of a family that nearly wasn't connected by choice now, as much as by blood. The compass tattoo on her wrist caught the sunlight as Kate reached for the door. A reminder that even after decades of separation, sometimes people could find their way back to each other. That legacy, like life, was marked not just by our origins, but by our choices.